Welcome to today's stream. Hello, everyone. I'm Wendy. I'm joined by my fellow colleagues here at NVIDIA. We've got Maddie, Edmar, Ashley, Bo, and Paul, and we're going to give you a thorough introduction to SimReady asset creation. And I'm really excited about this because this is something that can actually make you guys a little bit of spending money. So, as a primary job or a really lucrative side hustle. So, before we get into it, though, Edmar, do we have any announcements that we want to let our crew know?
Well, actually wanted to send a big congratulations to the Isaac team. The Isaac team has taken live streams on head on, and they're in their first month. They have their fourth one coming up next week. But they've just been doing great. So they have a live stream every Tuesday, same time as this one, but on Tuesday. So if anyone's watching it, interested in robotics or learning more about Isaac Sim, you get to hear from a rotating cast of developers who kind of just tackle a project and then do have a specific topic plan beforehand where they're going to walk through. So yesterday, Avi showed you how to import a brand new robot that you wanted to use in Isaac. So really cool workflow. So all the Isaac streams are going to be, of course, on our YouTube channel after they finish, so you can still watch them all right now. So big congratulations, and I think Michael Gassart is doing the next one on Tuesday, so look forward to that. And then on this live stream next Wednesday, we're going to have a great developer on, Adam Hughes, who a lot of people might remember from the community before he came to the Omniverse team. Fantastic guy. He's going to be covering the new manufacturing demo pack and show people what's in it, how to use it, cover all the workflow there. So, but today, really excited for, as Wendy just mentioned, to cover SimReady. Now, people might be like, didn't you guys just do this GTC? We did do it at GTC. Actually, Bo is the man who actually led a great session on GTC, and then we had a second session in a panel format with Paul and Bo, and I think Gav was on there,
Yep.
right? And
Mhm.
that was a lot of fun. We got to take people's questions. However, for people who aren't registered as a developer on NVIDIA On Demand or the GTC session site, you might not be able to watch that right now freely, but it is pretty easy. All you have to do is register. But we wanted to put something up in this format on YouTube so anyone could watch it super easily. So we thought it would be great kind of way to go over all the basics, what we covered in the session, some of what we covered in the session with Bo on the panel. And Ashley also, as she just mentioned a few minutes ago in the warm-up, was also very motivated by that GTC session and started doing a live stream series based on SimReady assets. So, thank you everybody for coming today. I think let's start with like the basics, right? If you don't know, this is the first time you're hearing the term SimReady, I can people can probably guess what it means, but what is the actual definition of SimReady?
So, essentially, 3D content in the past has always been for visual representation only. It's been stuff that you've used in video games and film and architecture and design, and if it looked good, it was right. That was enough. When it comes to simulation, with Omniverse is a platform, a development platform where you want to be able to run simulations. You need to add extra data to 3D content to make it useful. And there's a number of different types of data that you can add. You can add physics for collisions, for physical simulations, for AMRs running around warehouses and identifying objects to not run into, those sorts of things. If you want a forklift to pick something up, you want to have it behave physically. You've also got machine learning for visual computing called synthetic data generation, where you're generating a lot of imagery and you want to be able to identify what's in that rendered frame down to the pixel in terms of this is a crate and this is a shelving unit and this is a human and whatever else is in there, which is called semantic labeling. So adding semantic labels so that you can identify, or so that the computer can identify things, and so that you can train your networks against that data. So SimReady is about developing a standard for 3D content to evolve it from just visual to something that is immediately useful inside of simulation. So
Okay, that's
hopefully
awesome. That's super helpful. So is there at this point a pretty well accepted standard, or is that still being evolved?
It is the SimReady spec is evolving as we speak. It's evolved from GTC to now over the past month. It continues to evolve. It is a living, breathing ecosystem that will continue to change. At GTC, we started with props, simple static objects, crates and bins and ramps and things like that, things that really don't have articulated pieces. Right now, we're starting to look at what's next. So we have a SimReady specification already for 1.0 that will be coming out with a massive content library of over 1,000 models when the next Create, or I should say USD Composer, ships later this spring. And then beyond that, we'll be continually adding new kind of classes of objects. I know that on Discord, I've seen questions about, are there trucks that are SimReady yet? And vehicles is kind of a class of objects that are being worked on. The Drive Sim team is helping drive that, pun intended, but essentially just trying to evolve it so that it is as comprehensively useful and allows people to build libraries that are consistent instead of having at random FBX files and SketchUp files and all the different file formats. Using USD becomes really kind of the de facto standards and gives us a lot of flexibility.
Okay, that's cool. And actually just gave a nice little mention of, we do have a SimReady channel on our Omniverse Discord server. So if you want to kind of follow up with us afterwards or follow up with the community on SimReady assets, definitely jump into that title, just labeled SimReady. And Paul, so what type of, what you have a great background as an artist and a modeler and doing texture work. What kind of skills are required from an artist perspective to really kind of take advantage of this opportunity for creating SimReady assets?
Yeah, so the sorts of skills are the ones that you would generally find from people who have dabbled in game industry or VFX. Generally, those are pretty much just straight drop-ins. So if you know things like Blender or Substance Designer, you can pretty much just run with those tools within synthetic data and start generating the things that you want. One of the big things there is a kind of an additional is proceduralism. So if you do have any experience with proceduralism, that can really help out a lot.
And I think the big question that Wendy and I and Maddie all see in the community when we talk about this is like, how much actually can you earn from doing this type of work? Is it something that people can really generate a significant side hustle for? What can we share about that?
So, to be completely fair, right now when it comes to finding content, 3D content that is simulation ready, that you can use to commercially train your algorithms, it's a fairly small subset. There's a lot of content out there that is for education only, or it's been released under educational licensing, so you can do theory work with it, but you can't actually release algorithms that you've trained against that data set. You need to find commercial data sets. So the number of them that are out there is really small. So a lot of kind of greenfield space to kind of play in. The ones that we have seen to date, kind of the napkin math, is that instead of selling one model at a time, people are selling packs, collections, little, 25 to 100 models that are all geared and consistent. And they're doing it generally on things like annual subscriptions, and they're charging anywhere from $5,000 to $50,000 for access to the content itself, so that you can do commercial training. So there's certainly a lot of opportunity to make money, and the needs of the research community, the machine learning communities, is like a black hole. They'll just consume as much as you can give them. They want. Since I've been here 15 months, 14 months, whatever it is, I've had people say, can I get every building type in the world from a tiny home to a skyscraper? Or can I get everything you find in a typical garage? It's like, well, that's an unbounded question. Whose garage is it? Is it a guy who woodworks? Is it a guy who's a mechanic? Is it a hoarder? Is it my garage? What do you want? You got to kind of boil that ocean down a little bit into something that.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. They all go, yes.
My garage has 2 litter boxes,
a bike, and I think that's it. So they don't want my garage.
Well, that's the thing is there's no one like necessary data set. The world is really kind of the request, and nobody's done that yet. Nobody will. I mean, you look at the big model houses that are out there, the CG Traders, the Turbo Squids, the Sketchfabs, the whomever else. They all have the hundreds of thousands or millions of models, but they don't have everything. I mean, I can tell you that there are holes. I worked for Turbo Squid for 20 years. I know where the holes in their library are today. It's just when it comes to when saying, I just need a fire hydrant. Well, what kind of fire hydrant? Do you want an American fire hydrant that's current era? Do you want something that's historical? Do you want something that you find in Europe? Do you want a fire hydrant that's in Asia? What kind? I mean, it is that kind of variability, the breadth of a single category. You can drill very, very deeply into it and never really hit bottom.
And is it because like these assets, it's not just about their look, but also like their mass and the way they react physically? Like I'm thinking about that fire hydrant you're talking about. If we have one in the modern era, we have one in from the 1950s, or one that's in Europe. Like they're gonna weigh differently, not just look differently, but the way. So someone asked me this in my stream, and I was thinking about like reinforcement training for an autonomous vehicle. So if like I'm modeling this trash can, and say this trash can is hooked on a trash truck, and I've got this autonomous vehicle that's driving behind it. I want to be able to train my autonomous vehicle to recognize this trash can hooked on the truck. So if the trash can falls off and breaks into a bunch of pieces, I want for the trash can to break in my simulation very similarly to how it would break in the real world. So is that a part of it being SimReady?
As far as the fracturing of objects right now, probably not yet. We'll get there. I mean, there's so many things. Imagine just with a cardboard shipping box, which we'll have a lot of them for warehouses and digital twins that way, made out of thin cardboard that if you dropped a wooden crate on it, it should crush. It should deform. Those kinds of things still need to be solved. We have our physics that's part of the USD schemas and whatnot so that they work inside of Omniverse. But there's no necessary definition today of how that should function realistically. So that's certainly coming. I think more importantly for your question about the fire hydrant is for like our drive team. They have geographic specific scenarios that people want to set up. I want to set up a roundabout in the UK that has those kinds of elements outside. You don't find those in the US or elsewhere in the world. Those are the kinds of differentiators that they're trying to mimic. So they're not putting American fire hydrants in Europe. They're not, having to kind of make those substitutions. That's really, a big part of it, is to fit the kinds of scenarios that people want.
Maybe I can add in kind of why that variety is needed, and why the quality of models is also important in this whole process here. Essentially, for synthetic data at least, we're trying to train an AI model what things look like, typically. And for that, you need the full spectrum of all of the permutations of what something would look like. So, for example, fire hydrants, as you mentioned, Bo, there's just a ton of variety, even in just that one aspect. And it also has to have certain requirements fulfilled for synthetic data, because this is part of the SimReady aspect. It has to have a semantic label for synthetic data, so it shows up on your data as this is a fire hydrant. And when you're trying to simulate the world, or even smaller scenarios, maybe in a factory or something, you have really specific requirements for all of these. And if they aren't there, then it's not easy to use that stuff, at least in synthetic data. So companies that have a need for this, they really, really have a need for this.
Right.
Yeah.
And so obviously there will be some evolution of this. Does that mean that when somebody creates an asset pack, or an asset for that matter, like they may need to go in and update that occasionally and add any additional
Yes.
functionality?
But the idea behind SimReady was everyone thinks of USD as a file format, which is a real disservice to what it actually represents. It's a full scene graph. It is a much larger technology. And the way we design SimReady and a SimReady asset is it's not a single USD file. It's a package of component files, smaller ones that all interconnect based on that USD scene graph to allow you to keep things as modular as you want, so that you could have the geometry separate from the materials, and those get composed into a part, and then those end up getting composed into a bigger assembly and into something that's dynamic, and adding all of that data kind of independently of one another, so that you're not having to tear a big giant Uber asset apart and go, oh, I've got a new physics module, I now need to tear out all the old stuff and replace it. Hopefully the way that we're trying to design it and the way we've been thinking about it is, how do we try and make it so that it's non-destructive? So that if you have new physics, that, we have physics for rigid bodies, but now there's SDFs. How do we make sure that you could have both and make them variants within that so that they both exist instead of having to tear everything apart? That's really one of the big goals. So yeah, of course there'll be evolution. I mean, as we get more sophisticated materials that have thermal characteristics and sonic properties and other, things that make the world real, those will get added in, but we're trying to do what we can to limit the amount of destruction that you have to do in order to make that happen.
Is that why you wouldn't just grab like a game ready asset off an asset store and just add semantic labeling to it and call it a SimReady asset?
Right. Yeah. You can do that if you just want it for a one-off. But if you want it to be,
if you have to.
yeah, exactly right. And even that's a bit of a challenge, is that finding the asset, you're finding it in one of any number of formats using any of number of renderers that were all designed for visuals and not necessarily for simulation. So now you're having to kind of unwind that to even slap the SimReady label on to go and work with. So it's a little bit more nuanced than just a single file. And that's really kind of the hope, is that in the future, when you do have a library, if somebody's building it as an artist, if you're building out a library of fire hydrants, or you're building out the garage elements, all the tools that you find in a toolbox, when you have that collection, now you want to add something new to it. You've got one with the SimReady asset, a consistent starting point. You don't have to go back to the Max file or the Blender file or wherever else. Now you've got this nice homogeneous layer that you can now augment through procedural code and through Python and through Omniverse and whatever other things. But we're just using standard USD. You could hand code these things as well, so that at the end of the day, you end up, again, with something that is more than just SimReady.
And since I assume like the move for digital twins, or towards digital twins, and a lot of companies are really embracing right now, is driving a lot of this. And how does an artist kind of network with the companies that would be able to work with? Like, should they be part of, make sure their art is contained on TurboSquid, or we actually learned of a new company that recently by one of the founders, I think, of TurboSquid, CGHero.com. Is that, how can an artist really so say you want to do this and you want to monetize and earn some revenue, what would be the next step?
Certainly you want to be visible. So whether that's ArtStation portfolio, whether that's selling your content through TurboSquid, CG Trader, Sketchfab, we're all of the kind of standard marketplaces. But if you want to try and get work, then it's the CG Trader and CG Hero who have custom, contracting abilities, and they're the ones that are getting or helping kind of land client work on a big scale. Then that's certainly kind of an easy path, an easier path forward than trying to promote yourself kind of as a one-off. If you've got a small group that are working together, then as a collective, then you can build a portfolio site and start to try and solicit directly. But generally speaking, I know a lot of people are using the CG Hero route to be able to show what they can do. They get kind of classified as, do you like to build vehicles? Do you like to build furniture? Do you want to build, hard surface stuff, or a character person, whatever it is, so that when the requests come in, they have somebody that matches that skill set, so that they're not asking somebody who's built a car to build a person, which
Yeah,
very
I
different
think
skill sets.
I think we'll have a live stream with those folks soon because the CG Hero website seems pretty cool. And for the contractors out there, they don't get charged anything.
Correct.
The company pays a percentage of what the project is, so you don't have to pay anything to advertise yourself on there. So I think
Right.
they actually did add a filter recently for or a tag for Omniverse, and I believe SimReady, so you can actually identify yourself pretty well, and companies can find you easily that way. So that's pretty cool. And Ashley, so you saw the GTC session, and you were inspired. Tell me what made you want to do a live stream series on SimReady.
Well, so before my journey at NVIDIA, I have always worked as a 3D artist. I did like freelance work. I worked at a 3D printing studio, but a lot of what I was doing was organic sculptures. So if anyone's familiar with like Blender and ZBrush, it's basically taking like a ball of clay and using like a tablet or your mouse and basically drawing the features on. And you're not super worried with topology until you start getting into the game ready aspect of it. So I wanted to see with my 3D artist skills if I could move over to a SimReady asset workflow. And it's very interesting that Bo has said you want to classify yourself with the skills that you have, because I am not a hard surface modeler yet. I'm taking a tutorial right now with Heavy Poly that is helping me a lot. But it definitely is a different workflow when you are... I'm making a trash can. I thought I was making a very easy asset.
The hardest one you could have picked.
Bo told me this morning I picked the hardest one. I was thinking it's going to be easy because I was watching Slava's workflow in the session, and Bo said that took Slava like 11 hours to model. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that thing is not even that complex. I was like thinking about just objects that I could model that wouldn't be so hard. So I was thinking a trash can because it's fairly smooth. It just has some handles. I know how to make loop cuts and scale those down and bevels. Way more complex than I was thinking. Bo, you actually have a pure ref.
I do.
Of references, but Bo found a way more complex brute trash can than I did. So I will give myself some grace. Mine is not that complex. Bo went like all out. And your model actually is a little bit better than mine.
So that, I built a pure ref board. I saw your live stream, I don't know, last week, 2 weeks ago, and was like, oh, she's trying to build this Rubbermaid brute trash can, which you kind of look at and you're like, oh, it doesn't look too difficult until you kind of dig into it. And you're like, there's a lot to deal with on this model. You're like, oh, the handle alone. It's like, how hard is that? And I was like, it took me a while, but just to find how the handles are built and how you start to, how you would build this just in general is really tricky. The base of the model has hand grips molded into them. I mean, this is stuff that's not a trivial project to start to try and carve things out. Now, you did say that you didn't want to go this route. So you found one that basically had a lip to it and everything else was pretty much flat.
Yeah.
But I mean, these kinds of curves, even, I've looked at models and modeled for almost 30 years, and I had to start doing experiments in like 3ds Max to try and figure out, well, how do I even build that kind of an object so that it was, and this is just a starting point here, so that, if I turn all this off, the first thing I realized is, one, it's symmetrical. This model is symmetrical from front to back along this, along the handle, and symmetrical across the side. So if I built 1/4 of the model, then I can be a little bit lazy. I don't have to do all the work. But even so, I had to start to come up with, well, how do I get the curvature? How do I start to kind of model out all of these different bits and pieces? How do I put the loop cuts in to give me the surface structure that I want? Make sure that I don't end up with weird pinching across the model itself, and then be able to add thickness to it. Because again, the SimReady model, you're trying to represent the real world. So if you're going to do that, you're going to put, if I'm working in Max, I'm putting a shell modifier on it. And then saying, oh, well, this is probably, 0.25 centimeters thick, so that I actually get the lip of the model itself in here to actually deal with. But then there's the handle, and the handle is the really hard part. And it took me a while to kind of even come up with a process that I could use to try and build something like that. And again, just an experiment. And there's nothing wrong with just trying to figure out, well, what am I doing? So again, the model is symmetrical, so why not build just half of it? And I started out with a line, and I had a circle to try and make sure that the curvature of the line actually matched, and was like, oh my goodness, this is going to be hard, because you have to extrude it to a thickness, then edit. And I should have had a couple of edit polys. I did it a little bit destructively, where I cut in and matched the circular, the diameter and the curvature of the circle, so I could get a nice smooth grip underneath, and then symmetry that just as okay, I think I have a process, because then now what I would have to do is pull the backs off and cut into the model of the body and marry those together. So, I mean, it's a non-trivial process to do stuff like this, to eventually get it down here. But, you end up with everything that is realistic. When you're trying to build SimReady, the idea, both for synthetic data generation and for physical simulation, is it should represent what the real world object is. You want the computer to see it as it exists as closely as possible, so it understands those forms and those shapes, so that it has a high percentage chance when you train those networks to know, oh, that's a brute trash can. That is something that I know what it looks like, and I can actually work with it. So that's really kind of where I started. But yeah, it's not the easiest model in the world to pick for your first hard surface model. I thought that was really I was like, wow.
Leave it to me to pick the most complex one. I say it in my streams a lot. I very often start high level and have to reel myself in. So that's a lot of what my streams are. And so that's why I wanted to explore SimReady, to see where can we start? What is there's so much to it. Where do I narrow it in to even begin? So people can learn from my mistakes. Don't do the trash can first, or do the trash can first.
It's a great challenge. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, it took, like I said, even I was doing experiments just to figure out, well, how would I solve this without trying to solve it in context of everything? Because if your model has any of that detail, you're just like, why do I want to put myself through that pain right away? That's what the block out terrible. And
yeah, I did do the blocking. So in my series, in my stream, you came on and we were talking about the introduction to it and talking about blocking. So blocking helped me a lot. I would say this is not half bad. Here's my lid. I made a very simple version, so you can see my brute trash can reference was not as complex as yours. So I tried to be kind to myself when I was picking this reference. And then I found a video from the actual Rubbermaid company where they were
I'm not seeing.
I'm not seeing the
don't see it
image.
Either? Yeah. No. Can you see the Blender file?
No, it's just got a loading screen.
Why does Discord do this to me? Let's try that again.
Never look at.
There we go.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay. So not so bad. Here's my brute trash can, and then I don't know. It's not the worst.
No, not at all.
Can definitely tell I'm not a hard surface modeler, so maybe in a few months I'll be a little bit more there. I wanted it to be as accurate as I could be.
Does the lid fit on top?
I am having some weird issues with... Someone was trying to help me with this on stream. See how when I try to bring it on top, it
wants to snap.
Yeah, it's
got some sort of a snapping system on. I'm not a Blender user yet. I'm still trying to learn.
I only use Blender for sculpting like this. So if anyone's watching this and you use Blender and ZBrush for this type of modeling, practice some hard surface modeling before you attempt something like this. Watch some tutorials. I gave everyone homework on my stream and said, go watch hard surface modeling tutorials.
I'd also say don't be afraid to write down your keyboard shortcuts for stuff you use all the time. I have a text document that I pull up constantly because invariably I'll forget the shortcut that I've set for how do I align all these edges or faces to an axis, whatever
Yes.
that is. And I've set a hotkey, so write them down.
I downloaded, there's a modeler, his name is Von Ling, and he goes by Heavy Poly. And he has a bunch of scripts he's made for pies. So like I can do like, if I go into edit mode, I can very easily add, maybe I don't have it in this Blender file, but you can very easily add things and it makes your workflow much faster. So that helps a lot too with hard surface modeling, is knowing your shortcuts and having pies installed to make it easier for you.
Right.
It's coming in the chat with a little keyboard shortcut, Control and Tab. We'll turn off the snapping.
Oh yeah, maybe it did. Maybe that was the issue. I'll have to go back and check, because I have a bunch of like custom hotkeys put in, so maybe I messed something up.
Okay, so people can watch your full session on the NVIDIA On Demand, I believe. It's gated, which means you just have to have a registered account, which is free. What can you go over briefly, like what you cover in that session?
Sure. As a matter of fact, we did kind of start to finish with the SimReady asset. So we started with the team that actually built the asset for me for GTC, which is our internal Lightspeed team. These guys build amazing content. It took Slava, the artist on that team, he said 3 to 4 days to go from start to finish on just modeling. And I cut that down to about a 15-minute speed run overview that, has some interesting information. I kind of narrated over it. Then I take that content inside of Omniverse and I conform it to SimReady manually, showing kind of how do you go about building the package USDs so that things fit together and they actually function together. So that at the end, you end up with a perfect SimReady asset. And then I took it and handed it off to our synthetic data generation team and a physical simulation inside of Isaac, so that you could see it both inside of like Omniverse Replicator for SDG output, so that it would identify it in this big warehouse with lots of boxes and crates and pallets, and then having the Isaac team build a conveyor belt and drop that asset physically on and watch it actually go around as part of a physical simulation, so that at the end of the day, we're absolving those teams who need to use it, who aren't necessarily 3D experts, from having to do anything other than consume it and use it.
Okay, and
that's what that session was in. It was all in an hour. So it's a bit of an overview.
I've watched it like 7 times now.
That's awesome.
You're going to be able to repeat it back to me and tell me things that I said that I don't remember what I said.
That's my new goal.
So I put the link to that session in Twitch and YouTube chat, so people can click on that. And like I said, if you don't have an account, you can just create one for free and be able to watch it. There's also a separate session which was a live Q&A, like I mentioned earlier. So I'll paste that one in the chat for a second. That could also have some nice little FAQ type of questions and answers there. Okay, so for artists who want to take the next step, so let's just go over it. So obviously, check out the session, obviously, on the GTC site that we just posted for. I would definitely recommend checking out Ashley's live stream. Bo actually was a guest on one of them recently. So Ashley, you just created a playlist for your SimReady live streams, I think, right?
Yeah, it's on my personal YouTube.
Well, it's okay. I won't tell anybody. Oh wait,
my personal YouTube has my personal YouTube has like 3 lo-fi build with me on Sims. That's all. So go to my personal YouTube. I don't care. So I would like to create one on the NVIDIA Omniverse one. So maybe we can get that going. But if they go and find one of my videos, in the description of them, there is a link to previous streams, so they can click that and they can find the playlist.
Okay, that's awesome. So obviously our YouTube channel is easy. It's just youtube.com/NVIDIA Omniverse. And then if you go to the live section, you'll be able to see all the live streams, including Ashley's. And actually, if you go to the magnifying glass and search for SimReady, you'll probably come up with Ashley's streams right there.
Yep.
But we'll definitely make sure we get a playlist for that also. Okay, so outside of watching Ashley's live streams, and then doing some practice yourself, checking out our Discord server, SimReady channel, maybe setting up an account on CG Hero or one of those other websites we mentioned, so that you have visibility there. What kind of are there any good industry websites where SimReady is discussed that people should also be following?
Not externally, but we do have docs on the Omniverse docs already. So there is a SimReady section at the very bottom. If you go to what was it again? Let me see if I can remember here real quick. docs.omniverse.nvidia.com. You get to all of our Omniverse documentation. All the way at the bottom is Omniverse SimReady. And it's an entire section of kind of best practices on modeling and naming and what we're trying to accomplish. Those docs will be updated as SimReady content goes live, like I said, later this spring. There were, some limitations that my team discovered that had prevented us from going live earlier. But we got those all sorted out within the Omniverse kind of platform itself. So I think that, when the next version of Omniverse ships, we'll be right there along with them. Finally, with our own browser too. So we'll have a whole new browser inside of Omniverse for SimReady assets specifically.
Awesome. Let me see. I'm trying to think. Do we leave off any kind of important information? Any gotchas?
There's community questions. One question from the community is who vets the accuracy of a model and or the semantic labeling? Is that part of SimReady or?
So the idea behind SimReady isn't to be a verified service, not like Checkmate is for TurboSquid or an ISO standard for CAD content. We're not looking to kind of subsume those or be some sort of a superset of them. Essentially, we're trying to provide guide rails because USD is so powerful. When it comes to semantic labeling, as a company, it's this is one of those kind of potentials for problems in that. And Paul and I have been in these discussions for hours where it's like, well, how do you get people to identify content consistently? Is it a car? Is it an automobile? Is it a vehicle? If you're in France, it's called voiture. What's the correct answer? Well, none of them or all of them or some combination. You can't control how a company wants to semantically label its content. What you want them to do is go through that exercise of how do I want to label it consistently? If I'm working with multiple vendors, do I want to include that in my semantic label somewhere? Do I want to make sure that all of that content that we build is built to one standard? And then as we pass it along to other people, then even if they use a different terminology, if I use car and you use automobile, you'll still be able to identify it and change the semantic label quickly. The tools inside of the Omniverse platform, or you can write your own, that can do the exact same kind of work. So that wasn't really the goal. For us, we did a reference implementation from a site called Wikidata, which is an open source website. And what they did was actually really clever in that instead of saying car or automobile or vehicle or whatever, they've got over 100 million objects and brands and types of things all identified. And you can add more if there's something missing. But instead of having that named label, which is language specific, they abstracted it to a numeric code that they call a Q code. It's a Q identifier with numbers after it. So that data entry now has synonyms, it has language localizations, it even has a category hierarchy tree that they developed. It's like, why would we want to reinvent that wheel? Now we've got this wonderful kind of generic code that can actually help start to identify and marry things up in a much easier way, where we're not trying to say you must label something in one way only. That's a never-ending argument.
And Pekka was also asking in the chat, where can he find like SimReady assets like now to take a look at? And do we have
We-
them in the mount?
We do not yet. There
That's what's
was
coming in the update.
Yeah, the biggest issue that we came up with was, and this is something that is not necessarily Omniverse specific. This is a problem that has been part of USD. And again, not a problem. It's just a limitation in that all of the content that SimReady is building was for our simulation tools, Isaac, Drive, things like that. They have their reference implementation set to meters, and all of our kind of foundation apps, Code, Composer, Presenter, whatnot, we're all centimeter based, and they all rely on this value called an MPU, this meters per unit, and it's a standardized value. So if you're working in centimeters, you're in 0.01 MPU. If you're working in meters, it's MPU of 1. Well, it turns out that when you move a model that's built in meters into a scene that's built in centimeters, it just ignores the value. Oops, so your 6-meter tree shows up as 6 centimeters in your scene. It's like, oh, that's not good. And this has evidently impacted anyone who's implemented USD. And we're the first group to build a tool to help identify those mismatches and allow that content to flow. So when you move your 6-meter tree into your new scene, it recognizes and puts this corrective transform using USD to help make sure that it's the right size and rotation and all of that. So that's all coming with the new build. So that's why we haven't released any SimReady content to date, in that, honestly, we didn't want users to have a bad first experience with it. That's a bad way to launch. So
Are there any other sites though that have SimReady assets that people can open up in Omniverse?
there aren't any at this point. There are certainly plenty of sites that are selling USD files and giving away USD files, and they're certainly companies that we've been talking to. Again, the marketplaces, the CG Traders, the Turbo Squids, those folks have USD files, and they're going to be looking to how they manipulate those to become SimReady here as soon as possible.
Interesting. So really, people who are getting started on this, like they'd be entering it pretty much at the start of this.
Very much so. Oh yeah, I mean this is, a whole new standard.
Yeah. Anytime you have an opportunity like this, I think the first ones in there usually are the ones that have some nice advantages. So I think it's a great opportunity. I'm really glad we're sitting here talking with everybody. Do you guys have anything else you want to add? If we don't have any outstanding questions from the community, I was going to suggest we spend the last few minutes on Discord in the community voice room, so we can open it up to any live Q&A from the viewers.
One
If
thing I
everyone
just
would
wanted
like
to add
to
on
come
the
hang out. Oh, go ahead, Paul. I can't hear you. For some
data
reason.
side. Working?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Yes.
A little soft.
Sorry. There was one other thing I wanted to add, specifically about synthetic data. So it's really useful to understand and research what synthetic data is and what type of things it needs. I just did a quick type in of NVIDIA synthetic data into Google, and the first hit is synthetic data for AI and 3D simulation workflows. And even that will just give you a brief overview of what synthetic data is and why it needs the sorts of things from SimReady assets or proceduralism or other aspects, and how they differ from traditional things like GAM assets, etc. So definitely brush up on that to kind of get a more holistic view of what's needed.
Super helpful. That's great.
Yep.
Okay, Ashley, when is your next live stream on SimReady stuff? Is your series done now?
I think the SimReady part is finished because I finally got into Omniverse. I'm more just going to play with this model now that I've made. Quite some time ago, I did a live connection to Substance Painter and really fumbled around with it. So I think now that this model is done and I have the USD conventions and I made the root node, I'm just going to move forward into bringing that model into Substance Painter and just make it look more like a trash can. So on Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, we'll be doing the live connector from Substance to Omniverse and add some noise to it and scuffs, make it a yucky trash can. I'm thinking of the trash can from my art classroom when I was a teacher and how gross that thing was. So maybe I can take that visual and make it real.
Yeah, it was interesting watching Slava work in that he anything that's a solid color, you would think, oh, it's blue plastic. It's just one color. It's never one color. There's always
Yeah.
subtle variations into it that just help the eye read it as one color, but there's just that.
That's exactly what I was thinking about. So I brought it into Omniverse today after doing all of like the USD and naming conventions and stuff. So I put the Omniverse material of like light gray plastic on it, and I was like, that is so clean looking. That is not even a trash can you find at Home Depot or Lowe's is not that clean looking. That
Right.
it was just too shiny, too smooth. So yeah, now even though the SimReady modeling part is done, like it has to look like a trash can. So that's the next step.
Are defects part of the SimReady process? Like,
That's
Yeah,
Paul's
it-
baby. Absolutely. I mean, it's
It should
coming. I
be.
mean, it's early days again, but Paul, you can talk about what you've already done, because there's a YouTube video of what you guys did, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think there's kind of two sides of that, right? So you want to be able to capture a lot of the natural variation, a lot of the natural defects inside of your base assets. But there's also need for, especially in synthetic data, for actually capturing defects, right? So in manufacturing processes, there's companies that want to know if there's like a big scratch on their car door, or like a screw in a really important place is missing, that sort of stuff, right? So in those cases, the workflow of actually having like a material defects projection, almost like a decal, right, can be a really important workflow for those specific things that you want to detect. And that's some of the stuff that I've been working on. Ashley and I were developing this stuff with Substance Designer. We're cooking up some stuff that will be forthcoming, and I'll be able to dive into that a little bit more in more detail then.
yeah.
Yeah,
And, go ahead, Bo.
I was going to say it's certainly, that's a little bit of helping define what SimReady for materials will be, is how we start to semantically label materials. That's not the case now. Right now, it's an object level semantic label. We have to get more granular in the future as well. So it's great that they're already moving that way.
Very cool. And Paul actually is very active on our Discord server. You can always find him typically hanging out in the synthetic data generation channel. So if you have any question, you want to chat with Paul, you can head there. Always feel free to ping me if you need to find somebody. If anyone joined us late, we got a question about where they can find these assets. So as Bo mentioned a little bit earlier, this stuff will be included in the next major update to USD Composer, formerly known as Create. So stay tuned for that. He said later this spring. So you don't
I'm
have
so eager for them to be out. You can't even imagine.
We're all just tapping our fingers and waiting.
Yep.
So it's coming, and it'll be there very soon. But if you have any questions, again, jump over to our Discord server. Feel free to chat with the community there in the SimReady channel. I want to thank everybody for spending the time today. I think we'll take the next 5 minutes to hang out on Discord and see if we have any questions there really quick. If anyone wants to join us who's watching, please jump over. It's discord.gg/NVIDIA Omniverse, and we'll be in the community room number 1 on the left-hand side of our server list. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for all the presenters for presenting. Thank you, Wendy, for being the queen of the stream you are. And getting us out there, and we'll see everybody over on Discord.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.